An atheist journalist thought he had the perfect argument, until Caroline Levitt responded with a story that changed everything. The stage was set. Bright studio lights illuminated the sleek, modern set of American Perspectives Tonight, a primetime show known for heated political and cultural debates. At the center sat Caroline Levitt, a rising political firebrand, poised and composed. Across from her was Alan Brooks, a veteran journalist known for his sharp, relentless questioning. Millions were watching. The debate was advertised as a discussion on leadership and policy, but everyone knew it would become something bigger. Caroline had built a reputation for standing firm, never backing down. Alan was infamous for pushing guests into uncomfortable corners, exposing what he saw as flaws in their arguments. For the first 20 minutes, they sparred over economic policies, government regulations, and social issues. Caroline handled the rapid-fire questions with confidence, delivering clear and articulate responses. She wasn't just a politician. She was a skilled communicator who knew how to connect beyond the studio walls. Then Alan shifted in his chair, eyes narrowing slightly. A subtle move only a seasoned debater would notice. He was preparing to take the conversation somewhere different, somewhere personal. The energy in the room changed. "Caroline," Alan began, his voice measured, "you often speak about your faith as a guiding principle in your leadership. You've even said faith should play a role in shaping public policy." She nodded, waiting. "But let's be honest," he continued, leaning forward. "Religion, Christianity in particular, is declining in this country. Fewer people believe in a higher power. Science has given us answers that religion never could. And yet, you continue to advocate for faith as if it's some universal truth. Why?" A murmur rippled through the studio audience. Caroline didn't react right away. She let the question sit. Alan wasn't just challenging her personal beliefs, he was questioning the relevance of faith itself. "I ask," he went on, "because millions in this country see faith as an outdated crutch, something that holds people back rather than moves them forward. Do you think that's fair? Or are you just unwilling to admit that faith is losing its place in modern America?" The room felt tighter. The camera zoomed in, capturing every expression, every flicker of reaction. Alan had thrown a match into a dry field. Everyone was waiting to see if Caroline would let it burn, or extinguish it with something unexpected. But she didn't rush to answer. She took a breath, tilted her head slightly, and gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. She knew exactly what to say next. Alan leaned back, tapping his pen against the desk. He was waiting. The audience was waiting. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was electric. "You say faith is an outdated crutch," she said, her voice steady, "that it holds people back. But let me ask you something, Alan." She paused. "What do people turn to when science doesn't have an answer?" Alan's lips twitched, but he didn't interrupt. "You see," she continued, "it's easy to dismiss faith when life is comfortable, when everything is running smoothly, when your job is secure, when your family is healthy, when the world makes sense. But when the ground beneath you disappears, when your child is dying in a hospital bed, when you're staring at a casket, when the doctors say there's nothing more they can do, what do you reach for then?" The room was dead silent. Even the producers, normally whispering behind the cameras, were frozen. Alan adjusted his tie but kept his gaze steady. "Caroline, people turn to faith because they're desperate. That doesn't make it real. It makes it comforting." She nodded slightly, as if she had expected that response. "Comfort isn't weakness, it's human. And faith is more than just comfort. It's resilience. It's hope. It's the belief that even in the darkest moments, there's still meaning. You can call that naive, but I'd argue it's the very thing that has kept people from collapsing under suffering for thousands of years." Alan exhaled through his nose, shifting in his chair. "So you're saying belief is necessary for survival?" "I'm saying belief is what makes survival worth something," she answered. Alan smiled faintly, shaking his head. "You're good, Caroline. But let's talk facts." He gestured as if resetting the conversation. "Religious institutions have been responsible for some of history's worst atrocities: wars, oppression, corruption. Yet you defend faith as if it's only ever been a force for good." Caroline's expression didn't waver. I won't deny that terrible things have been done in the name of religion. But let's be fair. Faith has also inspired some of the greatest acts of courage, sacrifice, and kindness the world has ever seen. The abolition of slavery, the civil rights movement, countless hospitals, schools, and charities started by people who believed their faith called them to help others. You can't erase that just because some have twisted faith for their own agendas. Alan sat back studying her. He didn't have an immediate retort. Caroline took the opportunity to lean in slightly. But if you really want to know why I believe in faith, why I defend it, she said, it's not because of history or politics. She paused. It's because of a woman I met 12 years ago. Alan's brow furrowed. A woman? Caroline nodded. Her name was Margaret, and she taught me something about faith that no debate could ever shake. No one, not Alan, not the audience, was prepared for the story she was about to tell. She rested her hands on the table, fingers lightly interlaced. Her gaze stayed steady as she began speaking, her voice quieter, more deliberate. 12 years ago, I was fresh out of college, working as a legislative assistant in Nashville. Politics was everything to me. I thought policy was the most powerful force in the world. But then I met Margaret. Alan remained silent, his posture rigid. The audience leaned in. Margaret was 72. I met her at a community outreach event for seniors. I was supposed to take notes, listen politely, then leave. But Margaret, she stopped me in my tracks. Caroline let out a small breath, as if the memory itself pressed against her. She had buried 2 sons, one to cancer, one to a drunk driver. She lost her husband to a stroke. She had no close family left. And yet she sat across from me, smiling, sipping tea, asking how my life was going. Caroline's voice tightened just for a second. I remember asking her how she did it, how she could endure so much loss and still sit there, warm and kind. She looked at me and said something I'll never forget. Caroline swallowed. She said, faith isn't about proof. It's about what keeps you standing when there is no proof. Silence. Even the hum of the cameras seemed to fade. Alan blinked, opened his mouth, then shut it again. Before he could find the right words, Caroline added something that changed everything. You say faith isn't measurable, she said, that it's built on emotions and experiences. But tell me, Alan, what about hope? Alan blinked. Hope? She nodded. It's not measurable. It's not scientific. You can't prove it exists, and yet people fight wars for it. They survive the impossible because of it. They hold on to it even when logic says they shouldn't. The studio held its breath. Alan exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The usual sharpness in his expression softened. Finally, he spoke. I think I need to process that. It wasn't the dramatic rebuttal the audience expected. It wasn't an explosive takedown. It was something far more rare, a moment of honesty. And in the days that followed, that moment would spark a conversation far bigger than anyone had anticipated.